revenge. He seeks power over these people. He follows them. He researches their families. He researches everything about them. So it's not completely crazy. She tells a story. I mean, how could you make up this story? This guy jumps in, and he's all sweaty, he's angry, and he says to her, take us, he wanted her to drive them to a woods down off in the South Shore, by the beach. He wants her to drive him to this woods. And she says, no, I'm not doing it. And he gets really angry, and he pulls a gun. Now, Rex had plenty of pistols. I have 2 other clients upon whom, if you believe them, he pulled a gun. Okay? So, it is what it is. I don't know if it's true or not. He pulls a gun, threatens her to take her, and she takes her keys and puts them on her seat, says, you can have the car, I'm just getting out. She gets out. Okay? He now panics. There's a girl in the window in the house adjoining the street. She sees out. He sees that, she sees, the taxi driver sees the girl looking out. And she thinks, she doesn't know why this guy panics, but he jumps out of the car and he disappears. She gets back in the car, she drives up the street, and here comes an unmarked police car. She pulls the guy, waves him down, and says to him, look, one of yours is acting crazy. Because she thought he was a cop. And allegedly he fired his gun when he went into the woods. So she tells this to the cop, and then she leaves. And now she comes forward with this story. I don't know if it's true, but it does put Rex in that situation, and it's not utterly implausible. There's other connections that are a little more tenuous, but they're thoughts. If you remember, he has an employee, Newman has an employee who claimed, she was on TV saying that she went on vacation from his architect business, and she went on a boat out into the Caribbean, and he told her that he would be able to locate her in the Caribbean. And she said, there's no way, I'll be in the middle of nowhere, you can't do it. So she's out floating in the, whatever it was, the second day or whatever. Under her door is an envelope. She opens it, and it's him saying, see, I told you so, words to that effect. Okay? How could that be? How could that happen? Well, here's an interesting fact. When I noticed this, when the police were unloading stuff from his house in Massapequa Park, one of the things that they put on their inventory list was survivalist equipment. Survivalism is a sort of a, for some people it's just a thing, a hobby. For other people it's kind of almost cultish. It's very weird. All right. He had survivalist equipment. Right? This is a hunter. Okay, Rex is a hunter. You all know that. When I took Peter Hackett's testimony years before that, one of the things I discovered was that he had a business, and I asked him about the business, and it was called Survivalist Incorporated or something like that. I forgot exactly. So it was a corporation, Survivalists Incorporated, words to that effect. And so I said, what is that business that you have? And sure enough, it was about, if there's going to be a nuclear war, which was imminent, they would figure out how to survive, and he thought he would make money on this. And he was in partnership with a sea captain who had graduated from the Merchant Marine Academy and was a boat captain. And this boat captain, he was Hackett's partner, right? And he's a partner in Survivalist. Boat captain, envelope under the door. Is there a connection? Possible. You know, could he have arranged it? He was, by the way, he was on a cruise ship or a pleasure boat, and what do you call it, in Hawaii. And he would take trips out there, this guy. But he moved to Georgia, and I haven't talked to him. I haven't been able to talk to him so far. But could there be a connection there? There could be, I don't know. But somebody ought to look into it. So there are things like that. The hunting aspect of this, where Shannon, her jeans were left with the pocketbook and her wallet behind Hackett's home in the marsh. And when the police commissioner was asked, how did that happen? The police commissioner at the time, his name was Dormer, he said, well, you know, her jeans came off in the sticker bushes. Yeah. I know sex workers don't wear loose baggy jeans. No. That come off in the woods, right? But we know that one of the other killers, and how much more time now?
Like 5 minutes.
All right. 30 seconds. There you go. All right. We also know, we've done our research, that Rex has other properties. If he doesn't own them, he had an interest in them, or he rented them all around the country. One of them north of Boston in a little shack up there, you know, one of those camper communities. He owns it in South Carolina. She's moving there with the kids. I know. Right next door to the ferocious brother who lives there, and he's ferocious. That's the right word.
But legally, that house can be sold at this point?
I don't see why not.
Oh,
they put back all the stuff.
Well, she's moving to the South Carolina property. But didn't they go into?
If after the sale of the house upcoming, do law enforcement or the FBI have any rights to search it again if they choose?
They need to get a warrant.
And okay, and then if they turn the house upside down again, like they did with the previous two searches, do the people residing there have any rights?
No.
Okay, so they're
if they get a warrant.
So that
they can get permission of the people who live there without permission. They need a warrant.
Right. So I'm saying it's similar to Rex's wife and kids, where they lose their rights to the condition of the house.
Correct.
And then it needs to be searched.
That's correct.
So it probably makes the house less marketable for Rex's wife to sell.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. I don't know who would buy it anyway.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's
like the Amityville Horror.
Yeah.
But anyway. Anyway, so he's got all these interests. He's got one in Arizona and Las Vegas. And I've interviewed people from those communities, Florida, some of whom become my clients, and Alaska. Alaska is the most interesting because Anchorage in particular. There's easily over 100 missing people in Alaska, and particularly in the area around, Anchorage, okay? And there are at least four, possibly 5, serial killers who worked out of Anchorage over the course of the last 2 years, which is bizarre. That little city, and they have all these crazy people. I mean, it's incredible, right? It's incredible. But one of them, a guy named Hanson, was a hunter. And his little predilection was to take these girls, put them out into the wilderness, and then track them down. And when he would catch them the first time, he would take off an item of clothing. And then he would do it again. And one girl was found frozen to death. Okay? But this was his thing as a hunter in Alaska. Now, we located 4 of these serial killers, Rex being one of them, all living within driving distance of one another in Anchorage, Alaska, if they, not necessarily in the same time frames, but Rex's sister-in-law, Åsa Ellerup's sister, who lives in Massapequa Park, bought property or acquired some interest in property in Anchorage. And Rex registered as a hunter in Anchorage, as a hunter. The interesting thing is, in order to do that in Alaska, Alaska requires that a non-resident have a sponsor. So we need to know who the sponsor was. I have foiled the sponsor's name, and the Alaskan authorities have frozen us out. They haven't said no, they just haven't said yes. They ignored us, so forth. But he's a hunter. And we know that Jessica Taylor was very likely hunted in Manderville. We know that this guy Hanson did the very same thing, removing an item of clothing before he had eventually killed her. Rex's brother also had a place in Anchorage. Okay? Rex's sister-in-law was very deeply involved in cultism and witchcraft. And she's the one that says, oh, I looked into his eyes, I couldn't believe I was looking into the eyes of the killer. And I didn't know any of this. She lived 5 minutes away from them in Massapequa Park.
That's hard to
Right.
believe.
And there are other connections we have. I'm not going to tell you about, time, nor am I ready to put them out there, but we have them, and the police have never called me. So when you look at Elrup and her daughter, and the things they were looking at on the internet, and the book that was left on the kitchen table when the police raided the house the second time, and it's a book that Satanists use. It's a big deal in that Satanist community. It's a book of horror pictures that a police officer took in San Francisco back in 1920s, late 20s, early 30s. And he collected all these horror pictures of women chopped in half, of prostitutes being, split open, and all these horrible things. And that book was on the table when the daughter was home, when they raided that house, on the kitchen table, that book. What was that book doing there? Okay? I've forgotten the name of it, but it's been made into a Mondo movie by, there's a guy who's the head of the Church of Satan. His name is Anton Lavelle, I think it is, and Anton LaVey, and he lives out in California. He made 3 different Mondo movies out of that book, and he's the head of the Church of Satan.
Oh, good.
And that book was on the human table. So you tell me there's nothing involved here. Take a look at the first picture of Orsa Elrup sitting in front of her house. Remember when the reporters come and she gives them the middle finger and uses dirty words and whatever? Okay? Look at what she's wearing on her arm. We picked it up and we zeroed in on it. It's a bracelet that you get from the Kabbalah, which is a cultish thing that cult people get into. And you get this bracelet from that. That's why they wear them. They're connected to cults. She's connected to a cult. The police want to ignore it. That's what's going on right now. You heard the district attorney announce early in the case, before any of the evidence was known except for the DNA and the pinging tower and the car. And he announced that Rex Human was a lone killer and the family knew nothing about it.
It's hard to believe.
Right? I said, why at that early stage would he make such a statement when he didn't have to do that? Because somebody was feeding him this information. That's why. And the final, and I'll finish on this point, okay? In 2009, when Maureen Brayton Barnes was murdered, and you think she was murdered in Rex's home, and the DA thinks so. The family, according to the district attorney, in his papers that he filed with the court, the family was in a hotel in Atlantic City and wasn't there. So they didn't know about the murder. And what he would do typically is he'd wait till his family went away somewhere, then he would commit the murder. That was their theory. Okay? So, and they had proof in the papers, papers they filed with the court. So they're under oath that they believe this to be truthful. They had a monthly bill of Rex's credit card in which it showed that they were in the hotel from, I forget what it was in August, I believe it was in August, July or August 2009, during the time from, let's just make it July for the sake of argument, from the time that Maureen Brayton Barnes disappeared until the time she was likely murdered. They don't know when she was actually murdered, but this was a DA guess. And the family was away in Atlantic City. There was the little proof. And the DA said there were 2 sources of proof that he had. That bill and Mrs. Elrup herself telling him that. And he believed her. And it's in writing. So we took the bill, and I have a witness. She sits right here, eyewitness, one of them. There were 2 other eyewitnesses. Okay? And we called the hotel. And we found out that it was one of these timeshare hotels. And eventually I got to the manager. And the bill itself was very strikingly strange because it said in brackets underneath the entry for the hotel stay, arrival date July 6th. Right? And she disappears July 9th, the girl. Okay? And the bill goes until July, whatever it was, I forget, 16, 17, something like that. I can't remember. So they were there. They weren't home, allegedly. When I talked to the hotel manager, who knew nothing about the case, and didn't identify who I really was, okay, I said to her, can you look and see if you still have the computer records? She did. She pulled them up, and I said, can you look up Rex Schroeder? They spelled it out for her. She looked, no Rex Schroeder anywhere. Can you look up Asa Ellerup? Oh, here it is right here. Asa Ellerup. She read it off to me, like that. And then she read off the entry. And I said, tell me what that entry means. And my only regret is I didn't tape record it. But, you know, I'm a lawyer, not a private eye, okay? But I have my witnesses. And she said, it means that she checked in on July 16th. I said, did she check in on July 6th? No, she didn't. She definitely checked in. I can tell you, here's the arrival date. I said, why does it have on the bill the arrival date? She said, that could have been, you know, a prediction. Somebody called in. She said, I've never seen it on a bill before, but she said, I don't know why it says in the bracket arrival, but I'm telling you, she checked in July 16th, and she left on July 22nd or something like that. In other words, they were home. They weren't there at the hotel. The story isn't making any sense. So when I hold my symposium in St. John's University back in January on all the evidence, I bring this evidence out for the first time. I put it out there. Immediately the press goes to Ray Tierney, and there's no comment. No comment. From that day till this day, no comment. Two other people they went to. The lawyer, Robert Macedonio, who's a lawyer for Asa Ellerup, and his sidekick, Veselin Matet, who's the lawyer for the daughter. And they asked him, what do you say about that? And they both say, John Ray is a liar. And we will prove it. I'm waiting. That phone hasn't rung yet. What's wrong here? What's wrong? Maybe 100 things and maybe 5 and maybe 1. I don't know. But something's really wrong here with the way this whole thing is conducted. And when the police finally, on May 13th, 2022, they held a press conference at Suffolk County Community College in Brentwood. I went to it, and I wasn't allowed in. Only the press was allowed in. So I had to stand outside with the state senator, Phil Boyle, and look together on a phone to watch the press conference. And this was the day that the police department said they were finally going to release to the public the tape, which Rodney Harrison publicly says because he promised me he would do that. So they now, for the first time, you got to hear the tape. And they put it on an obscure police site that the public couldn't just go right on and find. And said, we're going to play it here at the auditorium in Suffolk, and all the press is coming to see it and hear it. And they did a slideshow. And Detective Kevin Byrer ran the slideshow. He's the homicide detective in charge of that department since the time of the beginning of this investigation. Till now. And Detective Byrer put on a slideshow. And one of the reporters came out to me, knew I was outside in the parking lot, came out to me, an old friend, a good reporter, famous national program, I won't tell you which one. And he said, I can't stay there any longer. I said, why? He said, because they're lying. He said, they're faking the photographs. The photographs are doctored. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, take a look at it. They say that Shannon wandered into the marsh in a drugged up state of mind. It's not possible. I told you that. We've walked the marsh. It's a wall. You cannot walk into it. You have to cut your way in or find the hole that's behind Hackett's house to get in there. Okay? And then she walked through the reeds and then finally dropped dead after she took her pants off. That's what they're saying. You're laughing because it's absurd, right? That's why you're just spontaneously laughing. I'm not spontaneously laughing. I know they're lying. And they know. So she wandered into the impenetrable marsh, and they show, and that's when he walked out, the reporter. He said, they should put a big screen, they show the reeds, and you see the reeds parting. And she was ever showing it, you know, she's walking through, okay? Those reeds are not on the edge. They're inside. And secondly, what he said is they closed the aperture on the camera so that they focused the light, right, beam on the reeds, and what it looks like behind the reeds is complete darkness. And the reeds, so it looks impossible to, you know, you're going to be lost in this terrible place when you get in there, and you're going to drop dead, I guess. Right? Yeah, and take your pants off. You're going to do that because of the reeds. Those reeds never looked like that. If we believe the police, if Shannon Gilbert wandered in there after Barbara Brennan's knock on her door, if Shannon wandered into the marsh, it had to be twilight. We looked up the time. It was twilight. We went into the marsh and walked it the same week that Shannon would have walked it, only 2 years later, to see what we would see. And she came in, she's about the same size and shape of Shannon, and we saw that you could see people having coffee in their houses on Oak Beach, and you could hear the cars driving by on Ocean Parkway, and it wasn't that far apart, and it was light out. It wasn't dark. And indeed, even Barbara Brennan said the lights, the evening lights had already gone off when she heard Shannon knocking. That's why she had a clear view of Shannon. So it's impossible to say that Shannon was wandering in the darkness through the reeds. That's a lie. Didn't the cops know that? I've wandered there several times. I've gone in there, what, how many, 4 times? 3 or 4 times, I forget. I've done it. So I tested it over and over and over again. There's no way that happened. Homicide cops are in the business of facts, aren't they? And evidence. Because if they wanted you arrested for murder, right, they better make sure that they have enough evidence to convict you. Because they don't want a murderer walking out of there and forevermore being found innocent. So they are completely focused on evidence and facts. Evidence, evidence, always evidence. Sherlock Holmes rule. Right? Always evidence. Right? So these same homicide cops who dwell on evidence have concluded, first, she drowned. No evidence of that whatsoever, and they never did a diatomaceous test to see if she drowned. And she's found face up laying with her head on a bush. In an area where the water is under loam, it's only about that deep, 1 inch or 2 inches deep. Okay? Then they changed that story and said she died of natural causes. When some smart people from the audience here probably, but some of the public said, wait a minute, we looked up the temperature that day. It was 60 degrees when she would have wandered into the marsh, and it was 70 that day. How would she die from natural causes? That's extremely unlikely. So then they changed it and said, at this conference at Suffolk County Community College on May 13, 2022, they announced she died of a tragic accident. Those are 3 different stories, aren't they? And, by the way, the medical examiner of Suffolk County said she died of unknown causes. So the police went one step further on their own homicide and said she died of a tragic accident. Ask them, if you ever bump into one of them, what was the accident? They don't know. So how in God's name can they say that? And these are guys that are in the business of evidence. And there's no evidence of this whatsoever. And these are the same guys selling me the story. There is, let me finish, something really wrong here with the Suffolk County Police Department. It needs to be investigated, and we need a special task force to investigate these murders all across the country. Rex Uerman seems to have done his work in Virginia, in New Jersey, in Florida, in Alaska, and Las Vegas that we know about. There are other places as well. Please, if you can do anything, pressure the government to get a task force appointed, and let's get this right. Thank you.
When you say Rex Zimmerman did his work, you're talking about murders.
Yeah.
Okay. When Rod, go along with the three different stories you just mentioned, Rodney Harrison, toward the end of his term, was still saying that it was a job with Gilgo.
Yeah, he was just taking the word of the police.
Right, but he's a Suffolk County Police Commissioner at the time.
I know.
You'd like to think he's representing.
You'd like to think a lot of things.
He's representing more than just lies.
But I think it's, am I over time?
Yep.
I think, all right.
Yeah.
Doesn't she become an ME case, and wouldn't it, if there was an accident, wouldn't the ME?
Say so. The Emmys did not say.
Right.
And our Michael Biden, the most renowned coroner in the world,
Right.
said that it was consistent with homicide. And later on Fox News, he said it was murder.
Right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.